At level 1, we have the Jedi Younglings. At this level, children are young enough that they haven't grown much of an attachment to anyone or anything, and they aren't old enough to be considered Padawans. Mandatory blood tests are used on newborns born on Republic worlds so that the Jedi could find all of the ones that were Force sensitive, and if the midichlorian count was higher than normal, the information of the child and its family was sent to the temple. A section of the Jedi called the Acquisition Division would then go out and bring the children back to the temple for extra testing before adding them to the ranks of younglings. After being brought to the temple, children from every species were placed into 10 clans of 10 to 20 younglings, and they were trained in the Jedi arts starting with the very basics. While their lessons were only including the basics, this doesn't mean that their connection to the Force was small. At this point, all younglings are treated as equals as they learn the essentials of lightsaber training, meditation, physical agility, and their connection to the Force. Even the more powerful younglings typically had trouble controlling their connection with the Force and were powered more by their emotions, which is why meditation was such a key practice at this age. During this period in their training, younglings would go on one of their many rites of passage called the Gathering, which was the test where younglings would have to collect their own personal kyber crystals for their lightsabers. This event took place on the remote world of Ilum, and their kyber crystals would call out to them depending on their connection to the Force. At level 2, after many years as a youngling, young Force users were trained as an apprentice known as a Padawan Learner. At this point in their training, young learners are paired with a Jedi Knight or Jedi Master so that they can get real-life experience and advice from someone who was in the same situation as them growing up. This is a very crucial point in a Jedi's life, as their training at this level will influence the type of person they'll be once they're old enough to have their own Padawans. Also, considering the age of the trainees here, emotions run high, and it is critical that they learn to contain themselves and maintain control. Padawans typically trained in temple training for 10 years before spending about 7 years in combat training with their masters before they were considered to be ready for their own trials. Some Padawans, like Anakin Skywalker, managed to finish their training in as little as 10 years though, but that was mainly owed to the Jedi requiring more knights for the Clone Wars and thus rushed him to knighthood alongside other Padawans. Overall, the connection between a master and apprentice is one that can benefit both, but this is also a mentor that the Padawan can reach out to for a lifetime. Originally, Jedi Masters chose their apprentices, but once the Clone Wars started, the Jedi High Council was responsible for assigning the Padawans to their masters. We see this when Obi-Wan assigned Ahsoka to Anakin without Anakin having even met her. In retrospect though, Anakin was chosen as a Padawan by Kenobi. At level 3, the Padawan has completed their trials, and they're now known as Jedi Knights. As a Jedi Knight, they're officially a full member of the Order, but they haven't quite reached the level of a Jedi Master. This is their chance to prove themselves to the Order, to show that they will take all the years of training as a youngling and Padawan, apply it to their real-world missions, and eventually face hardships and still stick to their beliefs. At knighthood, there were 3 different levels that one could attain: Guardian, Sentinel, and Consular. Guardians engaged in combat more often than the other levels, and they focused mainly on martial arts and combat. Next, we have Sentinels, who tried to find a balance between the focuses of Guardians and Counselors. They seem to focus on non-force using skills such as security, computers, stealth techniques, demolitions, repair, or medicine. As for Consulars, they focused on finding diplomatic solutions to conflicts and sought peace and harmony over anything else. In general, the Jedi Knights were the most represented among the Jedi. While they were still studying and growing in the Force, they weren't able to pursue their own studies on their terms. Prior to the Clone Wars, this rank was focused more on completing missions that the Council set forth for them, although it was allowed for them to go on independent missions. Being a Knight also meant that these Jedi could start taking on Padawan Learners and try to help them successfully develop to knighthood themselves. When the Clone Wars erupted, any Jedi Knight was made to be a war general that commanded legions of clones. At level 4, Jedi Knights become Jedi Masters. Once Jedi reached the rank of Master, they had years and years of real-life and combat experience that could be passed on to any Jedi in the Order. That's why Jedi Masters held a different rank within the Order, as they were considered to be leaders to all their peers. Further requirements to become a Jedi Master: one must be recognized as wise and extremely powerful, being in the Order for a long time and being entirely devoted towards it. Additionally, you had to at least have the rank of Jedi Masters to be allowed to serve on the Jedi High Council. Anakin Skywalker was the one exception, as he was only a Jedi Knight, but he was only allowed on the Council due to circumstances surrounding the Supreme Chancellor. Becoming a Jedi Master was the goal of all Jedi, as it showed that their lifelong devotion to studying the Force had reached a level that reflected the time and patience put into training. However, only few ever achieved the rank, and most just stay at the Knight level. Once a Jedi reached the rank of Master, one could practice and study their connection to the Force on their own terms finally, and this is where many different Jedi ventured out into the world to find their connection on their own. The most traditional route to becoming a Jedi Master was to train up many Padawans to the rank of Jedi Knight by ensuring they were able to pass the trials. Luke Skywalker never officially made the leap to Jedi Master in terms of being promoted by a council, but once he established his own temple and trained Jedi after the Galactic Civil War, he was considered to be a Jedi Master due to the trials and hardships he had overcome and his connection to the Force. On the other hand, Kanan Jarrus was believed to be one of the few surviving Jedi after Order 66, but he was only granted the rank of Jedi Knight and never made it to Jedi Master, even though he was extremely qualified and took on his own apprentice, Ezra Bridger. A small variation of a Jedi Master was known as a Sage Master, and these were supposed to be some of the most powerful Force users ever seen by the Jedi Council. There were only ever 2 Sage Masters, and their statues were on the ceremonial staircase that led up to the Jedi Temple. Sadly, the rank was retired from the Jedi Order, and the rank was completely forgotten about. Level 5 is for members of the Jedi Council members, which are the most recognizable Jedi in the Order. Some of the most notable Jedi Masters that were part of the Council during the Clone Wars were Obi-Wan Kenobi, Adi Gallia, Yaddle, Evan Piel, Shaak Ti, Mace Windu, and Kit Fisto. These were considered to be the wisest Jedi alive, and their wisdom was used to debate and resolve issues that not only came within the Order, but also connected to the Senate and government as well. The Jedi Council had the right to decide when Padawans were ready to take the trials, or when Knights could move up for being Masters. Everything going on in the Jedi Order had to be approved by the Jedi Council, and while most decisions didn't require a unanimous decision, most of the time the Council seemed to be like-minded on most issues. The Council was divided into 3 tiers. Firstly, lifetime members, which were 5 Jedi Masters who held their seats indefinitely. Second, long-term members, which were 4 Masters serving extended but finite terms. And thirdly, limited-term members, which 3 Jedi who served shorter, rotating terms to provide diverse perspectives. This setup should ensure the Council was always set up in the best way to make decisions. Once the Clone Wars started, the High Council went from being a peacekeeping leadership group to a wartime leadership role that worked closely with the Supreme Chancellor and the Republic military. Another duty of the Council was to enforce the Jedi Code and select the members that would make up the Council in the event of a death. At level 6, one would become a Master of the Order. This is the level where power and experience come together to vote which one of you is the highest in the Order. In order to get this title, you have to be elected by the members of the Jedi High Council, and the vote had to be unanimous. All 12 members of the Council had to agree, and this position was held by Yoda and Mace Windu prior to and during the Clone Wars. Essentially, this Jedi was the key member that met with leaders of different systems, politicians, and Jedi Knights to discuss areas that were of a concern to the rest of the Order. Once the war with the Confederacy of Independent Systems grew, the role of Master of the Order and Grandmaster of the Jedi Order was combined, as Mace Windu was Master of the Order from 33 BBY to 21 BBY, and Yoda was Master of the Order in 19 BBY, before the events of Order 66. Yoda took over for Mace Windu after Mace decided that he wanted to take a more active role in commanding troops during the Clone Wars. Or at least that's what he initially said. He really gave up the position because he felt like he missed a chance to end the war when he confronted Dooku on Geonosis, and didn't put an end to things. The 7th and final level of the Jedi was the Grandmaster level. This is the most prestigious level that any Jedi could ever hope to obtain, and this Jedi was meant to be the wisest and most skilled Jedi alive. In order to obtain this level, the entire Jedi High Council had to vote unanimously once again for whoever would take this position. In the earlier days of the Jedi Order, multiple Masters were given the title at the same time, but this was changed long before the events of the Clone Wars. While other positions focused on leading and playing as a delegate between the Order and the government, This position was mainly focused on passing on their extensive knowledge to the next generation. They train younglings, meditate with their peers, and advise other Jedi throughout the temple. Two of the most notable Jedi who have reached this level in the Order were Master Yoda, who was Grandmaster of the Jedi Order during the Clone Wars, and Luke Skywalker, who took this title while he was rebuilding the Jedi Order on his own. Of course, he abandoned this title and responsibility, and the title hasn't been used ever since the fall of this temple, when Ben Solo took out all of his students and left him to sulk in isolation. Typically, this title was held for the remainder of one's lifetime or until they voluntarily gave up the position. With Yoda being the final official Jedi to hold the title, his duel against Darth Sidious in the Senate was even more symbolic, as Yoda was the highest level of the Jedi fighting the highest level of the Sith. At that time, it was clear that the Sith were stronger, as Yoda started his isolation after losing his duel, and he spent decades meditating until it was his turn to pass on his knowledge and train Luke Skywalker, who would end up becoming the next and final Grandmaster of the Jedi.